Today is Sunday, July 26th, 2026, and today is National All or Nothing Day. It's one of those unofficial holidays that celebrates committing completely to something instead of standing on the sidelines. Whether that's always a good idea is up for debate, but history is full of moments where somebody took a chance on an idea that seemed surprisingly ordinary at the time. And that's exactly where today's history takes us. A simple postal service that helped hold a brand new nation together. A tiny investigative office that quietly grew into one of the most recognizable law enforcement agencies in the world. And a single photograph from Mars that convinced millions they might be looking at evidence of an alien civilization. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your guide through the tiny historical details that somehow make humanity look even stranger. When the United States declared independence, winning the Revolutionary War was only part of the challenge. The colonies still had to function as one country. Messages needed to travel between distant towns. Government leaders needed reliable communication. Businesses depended on correspondence. And families wanted to stay connected across hundreds of miles. On July 26, 1775, the Second Continental Congress established what would become the United States Postal Service, appointing Benjamin Franklin as the nation's first Postmaster General. Franklin wasn't starting from nothing. He had spent years improving the colonial postal system under British rule, carefully mapping routes, reducing delivery times, and making the service more dependable. Now he adapted those ideas for a brand new nation. The postal system did much more than deliver letters. It carried newspapers that spread ideas, connected communities separated by vast distances, supported commerce, and helped transform 13 independent colonies into a country that actually communicated with itself. Today, we rarely think twice about dropping a letter into a mailbox or receiving a package at our front door. But one decision made on this day helped build the communication network that held an emerging nation together. Of course, once a country begins to grow, delivering the mail isn't the only challenge. Eventually, someone has to investigate the people who break the law. That brings us to July 26, 1908. At the beginning of the 20th century, the federal government had a problem. If the Department of Justice needed investigators, it usually had to borrow agents from other departments. It was inefficient, expensive, and often slowed important investigations. Attorney General Charles Joseph Bonaparte, a grandnephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, decided the government needed its own permanent investigative force. So he created a small team of just 34 special agents. There were no famous cases, no television dramas, no iconic headquarters. Just a handful of investigators trying to solve federal crimes more effectively. Over time, that modest office expanded its responsibilities, adopting new forensic techniques, tackled organized crime, pursued espionage, investigated civil rights violations, and eventually became known around the world as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. It's remarkable to think that one of the most recognizable law enforcement agencies on Earth began with only a few dozen people trying to solve a practical problem. Sometimes the biggest institutions in history begin with surprisingly small ideas. And sometimes all it takes is a single photograph. Sometimes the smallest discoveries end up creating the biggest stories. On July 26, 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter was busy doing exactly what it had been sent to do: photograph the surface of Mars. Image after image revealed a world of craters, canyons, and barren landscapes. Then one photograph changed everything. In the Cydonia region of Mars, a mesa caught the sunlight just at the right angle. To many people, it looked uncannily like a gigantic human face. Within days, the image spread around the world. Newspapers published it. Television programs debated it. Books claimed it might be evidence of an ancient Martian civilization. For years, the face on Mars became one of the greatest mysteries of the space age. Scientists were never convinced. They suspected it was simply a trick of light and shadow combined with the human brain's remarkable ability to recognize familiar patterns, even when they aren't really there. They were right. In 1998 and again in 2001, newer spacecraft photographed the same location with cameras far more powerful than Vikings. The famous face disappeared, revealing nothing more than an ordinary rocky mesa. The mystery had vanished, but the photograph hadn't lost its place in history. A single image, taken during an otherwise routine mission, had captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. That brings us to today's birthday. Stanley Kubrick was born on July 26, 1928, and few people understood the power of a single image better. Before becoming one of cinema's greatest directors, Kubrick worked as a photographer. That eye for composition stayed with him throughout his career, helping him create scenes that audiences remember decades later. He refused to be confined to one genre. Instead, he challenged both himself and his audiences with films as different as Paths of Glory, Dr. Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Barry Lyndon. Each one pushed filmmaking in a new direction, and many are still considered among the greatest films ever made. Kubrick also became legendary for his perfectionism. He would film scene after scene, sometimes asking actors to perform dozens or even more than 100 takes until every detail matched the picture he had imagined. That pursuit of realism became so convincing that decades later, conspiracy theories claimed he had secretly filmed the Apollo moon landing after directing 2001: A Space Odyssey. There is no credible evidence for that story, but it says something about how believable his work appeared on screen. Kubrick said once, "The truth of a thing is in the feel of it, not in the think of it." Whether you agree with him or not, his films changed the way generations of audiences experienced storytelling. And looking back at today's stories, it's amazing how often history begins quietly. A postal service created to connect scattered colonies. A 34-person investigative office solving practical problems. One photograph from a spacecraft millions of miles away. None of these moments announced that they would become historic. They simply began their work. Only later did the rest of the world realize how much they had changed. Anyway, the next time something seems ordinary, a conversation, an invention, a photograph, or even an idea, it might be worth paying a little closer attention. History has a habit of disguising its biggest moments as perfectly ordinary days. And I'll leave you with this thought from Thomas Carlyle. Every noble work is at first impossible. If you'd like to hear more of my work or see other corners of the internet I've been quietly building things in, you can head over to waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes. I'll see you tomorrow.